So I'd like to tell you a bit about what it was like growing up in Madison, Wisconsin, where our family moved in 1965. I was actually born in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and my dad was a professor in the medical school there. Then he took a job at the University of Wisconsin Medical School, and we all moved to Madison. This photo is taken in the backyard of the house in Madison. And this is my father Jack, my mother Nancy. That's me, that's my wife Allison, and here are Peter, Eric, and Alex. This is my brother John and his wife Jan, and their kids Matthew, Carly, and Luke. This is a long time ago. Everybody's much bigger now, of course. And this is my youngest brother Eric and his former wife Gretchen, and their children Laura, Megan, and Clay. So this is taken in what I thought was an enormous backyard with big maple trees where we used to play knee ball, football, where you were on your knees, and wiffle ball and all kinds of other things that boys love to do. We chased each other around a little bit in the backyard too. But Madison was relatively a medium-sized town. It was the state capital, is the state capital. That's where the University of Wisconsin is located. And when the students are in town, about 40,000 students, the population of the city is about 250,000. In the 60s and 70s, when I was growing up there, it was a very calm and safe place to grow up. Very little crime. And my parents thought nothing of putting me on the bus to downtown Madison. We lived about 3 miles away from the downtown in a little village called Shorewood Hills, which was independent but surrounded by Madison. And I would take the bus to go to the downtown YMCA to play basketball, or to the downtown public library, which seemed enormous to me, where you could check out almost any book you could imagine. And riding the bus back and forth, nobody worried about kids being kidnapped or harmed in any way. The school that we went to was Shorewood Hills Elementary School, which was about a block away. We could very easily walk to the school, and we often walked down the ski hill, which was 2 doors away. The home that we grew up in is on a ridge, which is called a glacial moraine. It's a bunch of gravel that was deposited in a ridge by a melting glacier. The glaciers in one ice age stopped in Madison, and when they melted, they left behind all this rock and gravel they had scraped along the way south. And the hill, the house was on a hill. Dartmouth Road was the road that went across the ridge of the hill. And because of the hill, there was a ski jump built. So we would walk a few houses down, walk through a little park by the ski jump, and then down what became known by the little cousins as the Hill of Death, because it was pretty scary as a little kid to sled or saucer down that hill. We walked down that hill to school and walked back up the hill. I was not a big ski jumper. In the winter you could go off the ski jump. John was more adventurous than me and did go off a few times. I went off once and I said that's plenty. But the ski jump was kind of a focus of young boys' activity, and one of the things I remember, which kind of tells you about Shorewood and kids running around kind of unsupervised, is I had a classmate in elementary school named Steve Ellis. And Steve one day decided that he was going to ride his bike off of the ski jump. And he did. And somehow he landed and didn't break any bones, but that was something we all never forgot. The village of Shorewood Hills had one policeman and one police car. It was right on Lake Mendota, one of the lakes Madison is built on. And it had a swimming beach. And when we moved to Madison in 1965, I went down for swimming lessons, and there was another kid my age at the beach waiting for the lessons. It was not a big beach, it's a tiny little strip of sand, but they had a boathouse and some piers that went out into the lake, including a high dive you could jump or dive off of into the lake. And that kid I met was Sievert Shands, Mr. Shands, who in the very first video you saw help me setting up. I'm using his camera right now, which he's kindly, and his lighting and all of his equipment to make these videos. So just amazingly, Mr. Shands and his family live in Springfield, Virginia, about 20 miles from where we live in Great Falls. We didn't plan it that way, but it's worked out very nicely to be in the same location as Mr. Shands and his family. But so you got to know everybody in Shorewood very well, and everybody knew what everybody's kids were up to. That is, parents kept an eye out for the children of other people, and you always felt like you could go up to somebody's house and ask Mr. Perina or Mrs. Seebecker or other parents of friends of mine for water or a cookie or milk or something. It was a very welcoming place because it was relatively small. Only about 2,000 or 3,000 people lived in Short Hills. Short Hills also had, it wasn't a golf course that belonged to Shorewood, but it was built right on the edge of Shorewood called Black Hawk Country Club. And a lot of people in Shorewood belonged there. And I grew up, all of us grew up playing golf at Black Hawk, which is a beautiful course with lots of hills. And so it's challenging and fun to play. And the greens were sloped and so fun to putt on and so on. It's named after Chief Black Hawk, who was a leader of an Indian tribe in that part of Wisconsin in the 1800s. And on the golf course were a number of Indian burial mounds in the shapes of a goose or 3 bears. So the holes on the golf course were named after the Indian mounds, most of them, or other connections to Indian culture. One hole with a big oak tree in front of the green, guarding the green, was called Spirit Oak, to remember the Indian spirits that the Indians believed inhabited that location. So it's a beautiful place with lots of, not just a golf course, but lots of history, which may have led me to be interested in history eventually when I went to college, maybe. Madison was, because it was the state capital and where the university was located, had all kinds of sporting activities. So Shorewood, where we lived, was right next to the Nielsen Tennis Stadium, which is an indoor tennis stadium, and to the athletic fields where the track and field events were held, where the football team would practice, where the band that played, the marching band, would practice. So the kids from Shorewood could very easily walk down to all these things. There was a baseball field there that doesn't exist now, where you could watch Wisconsin play college baseball against other teams. You could watch the track meets. I remember very well a high jumper named Pat Matzdorf, who was one of the first to go over 7 feet. He did the Fosbury flop. He would jump backwards, and his back would be going over the pole rather than belly first. And it was amazing to watch the wonderful athletes at the University of Wisconsin. Of course, we could walk to the football stadium and to the basketball arena, which was then called the Field House. One of the fun things about Madison being the state capital is that the state basketball tournament was in Madison every year. So every spring, and in Madison, the state at that time had different flights. That is, the big schools would play the big schools, and the small schools would play the small schools, and in between. But kids from all over the state of Wisconsin would come to Madison, and for them it was a big deal to come from a small town to a city of 250,000 people, and the state capital, and where the university was located. So many of the kids needed places to stay, and families like ours offered to put up kids, have them sleep and eat with us as they came to cheer on their teams that were in the tournament. So we got to know lots of kids from throughout the state, and went to a lot of tournament games at the old field house, which was a blast. My basketball career ended in 10th grade. I played in 9th and 10th grade at West. But Uncle John's basketball career went much further. He played on the varsity, and his team went to the state tournament one year after I had gone away to college, so I didn't see the games. But we were very proud that his team did very well. They lost in the tournament to a team that had a 7-foot player who eventually played at the NBA, so there's no shame in losing that game. But Madison was, it's hard to find anything that was unpleasant about the place. It was small enough that you felt you could get around. There were really no dangerous parts of town that you had to avoid. It was a wonderful place to grow up. If I hadn't grown up there, it would have been a beautiful place to raise a family, and I'm very happy to have grown up in Madison.